Hi, and welcome back. This is session number 23 of the Perio Patient Podcast. And I'd said earlier in another session that I wanted to go into X-ray. And I've studied this particular area, and I think we're going to get into an interesting thing that will put you on the cutting edge as far as what's going on in the world of radiology and dental X-ray. You will know more about this than a lot of people in the general dental population so far have become aware. And part of it, I think, is to do with the difficulties in actually communicating to patients. Sometimes when some standards are so entrenched in society, changing them can feel very disturbing to people, to the general public. So I'm going to do my part here to help you as a patient, and I'm going to do that by reading you an article. And this is out of Forbes magazine, and it is dated January 28, 2020. I will have a link to it in the notes here. But the title of the article is Why You Should Ditch That Lead Apron in the X-Ray Room. It's by a gentleman by the name of James Konka, and I'm sorry I don't know his credentials, except he says at the end that he is a scientist. He's been doing it for over 33 years. He's involved with Department of Energy and a bunch of other things. He's into the side of radiation that has to do with engineering and nuclear regulatory things, that sort of thing. So, but I'm going to read this, and again, I'll link it. I also read a number of other articles, but I'm not going to do those, but I'll link those as well if you want to read on. Here's what he says. Those of us in the field have always known that draping that lead apron over you when getting an X-ray at the hospital or the dentist was not necessary, that it didn't protect you or lower your risk of cancer because those extremely low levels of radiation used in diagnostic exams aren't high enough to pose any risk in the first place. But I never considered that it might be harmful to use these aprons. It turns out that many radiologists do. A number of radiology organizations are trying to end the historic practice of shielding patients from radiation with lead aprons, and some hospitals are ditching the practice completely, especially of covering reproductive organs and fetuses during imaging exams. That's because the presence of the lead apron can impair the quality of diagnostic tests and sometimes, inadvertently, increase a patient's radiation exposure, according to prominent medical and scientific groups, including the American Association of Physicists in Medicine, the American College of Radiology, the Image Gently Alliance, which promotes safe pediatric imaging, and Dr. Rebecca Marsh, a member of the Radiological Society of North America. Ever since the 1950s, it has been the practice to cover the testicles and ovaries during X-ray imaging based on studies in fruit flies in the 1940s that showed effects on DNA. However, those studies were found to be irrelevant to humans as the doses were extraordinarily high, and no such effects have ever been observed in humans at any dose. According to the 2007 publication 103, of the International Commission on Radiological Protection, ICRP, quote, no human studies provide direct evidence of a radiation-associated excess of heritable disease, unquote. Since then, studies have shown that use of these aprons and shields during X-ray imaging may actually obscure anatomic information or interfere with the automatic exposure control of the imaging system. Not only can this affect compromise the diagnostic efficacy of the exam, but often requires more imaging, resulting in an increase in the patient's radiation dose. The Food and Drug Administration has proposed removing the recommendation to use shielding that appears in the federal code from the 1970s. A final ruling is expected toward the end of this year, 2020. This is critical because state regulations are based on this ruling, and at least 46 states require shielding of reproductive organs under many circumstances. Like most of our actions involving radiation, this practice arose from an exaggerated fear of radiation, especially low levels of radiation. This fear originated after World War II and was formalized in 1959 when the world adopted a singularly foolish hypothesis for the negative biological effects of radiation called the linear no-threshold hypothesis, or LNT. In contrast to almost all data on living organisms, LNT assumes that any radiation is bad, and there is no threshold of radioactivity below which there is no risk, even at Earth background radiation levels. This is wrong. Background levels of radiation, which can get up to 10 rem per year, have never been correlated with health effects or cancer. A chest X-ray is about a 0.01 rem. Dental X-rays are orders of magnitude lower than that and provide less dose than eating a lot of potato chips. Besides, LNT purposefully ignores the immune system, which is extremely good at dealing with damage from low levels of radiation and removing cancer and dead cells. In the coming year, the National Council on Radiation Protection and Measurements, which gives guidance to regulatory bodies, is expected to release a statement supporting a halt to patient shielding. However, experts continue to recommend that healthcare workers in the imaging area protect themselves with leaded barriers as a matter of occupational safety, even though that also is probably unnecessary. Groups in Canada and Australia have endorsed the change, and a movement to abandon lead shields is underway in Britain, according to Dr. Marsh, a medical physicist at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus in Aurora, Colorado. So, no benefit from using these aprons and shields, but possible harm. And that essentially ends that article. So, there you go. We use a very small little camera now. It's amazing, and I had earlier had gone into a real long discussion, which you're not going to hear unless I do it some other time, about my experiences with the changes in dental x-ray in my career, from starting with dark rooms and chemicals all the way to the digital world. And I think it's an amazing area. I probably will come up with it again, come back to it again at some point. But I think that's enough for now. And you are ahead of the curve. So have a good one.